Welcome to Collector Car Showcase. My name is David Jacobson. If you're a Porsche, Mercedes, or BMW enthusiast, chances are you know the name Max Hoffman. Max Hoffman was responsible for introducing to American drivers marques such as BMW, Porsche, Volkswagen, Jaguar, Alfa Romeo, and many other European cars. Can you imagine a day when Porsche only sold 300 cars in the US and all by one man? His story is fascinating, and not just from the automotive world perspective. Well, we have a special guest with us today that's going to help us to explore the man, the myth, and the legend that is Maximilian Edwin Hoffman. Welcome, Ursula Nierakis. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Well, Ursula, thank you for joining us today. There's a lot to talk about with Max, and there's so much that you're going to share with us. But before we do that, I'd just really like to have the audience know a little bit more about who you are. So you can just say where you're from and just a little bit about you.
Well, I was born in Germany, came to the United States in 1966, became a citizen, and I'm now living on Long Island.
Yeah, it's a long way from the original home.
Yes,
So what brought you to America?
Mainly curiosity at a very early age, influenced by my father, I must say, who was in the automobile business. And not that I was aiming for that, but America was like a destination.
So was America what you expected when you got here?
Oh, absolutely.
It was?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In a good way?
Yeah.
Well, that's terrific.
It's wonderful, yeah.
So how did you first meet Max?
I was working at that time for Tiffany in New York, and I needed to improve my salary, to be very honest. I contacted the German consulate.
Okay.
And I said, I'm looking for a job, bilingual secretary, somewhere midtown. And they referred me to the Hoffman Motor Corporation, which I never heard before, in the Sequin building. They gave me the telephone number. I called, and I got a fellow by the name of Gunter Gray on the phone, and he asked to come over for an interview. And I went. Without long, he said, Mr. Hoffman happened to be in town, and I would like you to speak with him. Okay.
So the interview went well?
The interview went well, and then he referred me to speak to Mr. Hoffman. Okay. And this is how I first met Mr. Hoffman. He asked a few questions, and especially, I'll never forget, why are you leaving, or why would you like to leave Tiffany? And I said, to be very honest, Mr. Hoffman, I have to make more money.
I'm sure he liked to hear that.
He liked to, yeah. I was hired, so.
Yeah. So what was your first impression of him?
He was sitting behind his desk. He had a very large office, and I really had no idea what Hoffman Motors was all about. He was very sharp in asking questions. He looked over my resume, and that's basically it. And I said, I think I could fit into this without.
So did he hire you on the spot?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right on the spot. So he was a pretty decisive man. Mm-hmm. He knew what he knew, and he found something that he.
I guess so.
And but that's, from what I read and from what I hear, is that was kind of the way he was in business.
Absolutely, yes.
Decisive.
Very forward, very precise, to the point. Mm-hmm.
So Max is from Austria.
Yes.
And he has an interesting history that led him to America to accomplish what he's done. So let's just go back a little bit. So here's young Maximilian Hoffman, who with two N's.
Correct.
In Austria.
Yeah.
And his next move was to go from Austria to.
Well, from Austria, I understand he went to Paris and he opened up a so-called automobile salon. I still have the business card, to sell cars in Paris with a partner. In particular, I think he was distributing or selling the Amil car.
Yeah, Amil. Yeah.
Amil,
Right.
Yeah. And so far, that's all I know until the time came when it got critical in Europe due to the, the oncoming Hitler threat, and he fled to Holland at that time.
So before Holland,
Yeah.
and I was remiss in mentioning the fact that in Austria, before he
Yeah.
moved to Paris, that his father owned a bicycle and a sewing machine
Yeah.
manufacturer, and he was
Yes,
involved in that business
yeah.
as well?
Yeah, he was involved as a very young boy, and I understand he put a little motor on the bicycle.
Oh,
and
really?
Yeah, and he must have gotten very interested in his father's business.
But he didn't take it over. He decided to leave, and he wanted to pursue something in Paris because
Yeah.
that's where the automobile business was thriving. So he fled Paris.
He fled Paris.
And he went, from what I understand, he went to live with a Dutch family in Holland.
Yes, with a family called De Witt.
Oh, okay.
They hid him.
They hid him.
Yeah, and hiding, I would say they took him, but they pretended that he was Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
He was not Roman Catholic. Arie de Witt, one of their sons, became his friend.
Who he trusted. It was a
Yeah,
good trusted
that's
friend
yeah.
at that time.
I really don't know how long they kept him.
But they did hide him, and they did also manage or gauge the flushing of the toilet.
Correct.
Because the Germans would go in
And check everything,
to
of
see
how
if-
many occupants are in the house, etc.
as opposed to how much
Yeah,
flushing was done.
yeah.
It's hard to imagine. When Max came to the U.S., what was his first plan of action? What did he do when he arrived?
Well, he supposedly came with only $300 in his pocket. Okay, his great love were cars. He could not accomplish that, I understand, but he met a French couple of jewelry designers, and he came up with the idea of producing plastic jewelry and
Plating it?
plating it in silver and gold or whatever metal, and and from there on he told that story. He told me himself one day, and he said it went like crazy. In no time, he made millions.
Really?
Yeah, in
Wow.
a few years.
So this was a time when metal was pretty
When
scarce.
metal was very scarce,
Because of the war.
gold was very scarce, and because of the war efforts, and women liked the large-scale jewelry, and they're very lightweight. I have 2 earrings.
Oh, really?
He gave me, and so he told me that story,
Yeah.
and then he gave it up, and went back to his great love of cars.
When most American businessmen thought it was too risky to import European cars,
Yes.
and this is obviously going back many years before
Correct.
you worked for him, but so can you tell me any insight that you heard from him or spoke to him about that spoke about the first days of importing he started with what? Which manufacturer did he start with? Was it Volkswagen?
He started with Volkswagen.
So he was responsible for Volkswagen coming into the
Correct,
U.S.
which was extremely, I would say, daring at that
Sure.
time,
Oh, yeah.
because Volkswagen did not have a good name at that particular
And
time.
it was German.
And it was German, and it was very small.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, that's right.
So it was daring for him to pick up Volkswagen.
But he did.
He did.
He imported. He was the first one to introduce.
yeah.
He was the first one to introduce Volkswagen to the United States market.
Yes.
And how did that go?
Well, I really don't know the details of how that went, but I do have a picture that shows him on Park Avenue, standing there next to a Volkswagen Cabriolet, and with a model, and presenting it right on Park Avenue.
Interesting.
But yes,
So it seems to be what I've read is that Volkswagen, after a few years of not having much success, decided to come in and take the distribution back from Max.
yes.
And obviously the rest is history for Volkswagen, but it's something that Max seemed to have always regretted that
He
didn't-
did. In later years, he regretted that he gave up his Volkswagen contract. As a matter of fact, he said it was his greatest regret, because after that, Volkswagen became very popular
Yeah.
and sold and sold.
Yeah. So we all have regrets, right? And
Yeah.
I'm sure when you hear the rest of the story, you kind of, the wounds got healed, and he did quite well. So he left the Volkswagen, the manufacturer took Volkswagen back, the distribution of
Yes.
the product, but shortly after that, he started working with Porsche.
He started on a trip to overseas he was looking for cars to import to the United States.
Now, he had a showroom at this point?
The showroom idea came after he negotiated in Europe.
Okay.
First, he contacted the Porsche family and Piech, and he sees that they were working on this small sports car, which later became, I do believe, the 356.
Yeah.
And he got very enthusiastic, and he met at that time was Ferry Porsche, the son of Ferdinand. And to make a long story short, he came to an agreement, and he said, we'll ship him over to the United States.
Yeah, incredible. Now, for people that are Porsche enthusiasts, from what I understand, he actually went to Porsche and he said, we need a car that is $3,000 or cheaper, that the American people can drive to the racetrack and then drive back home.
Yes.
And he said it has to be lightweight and inexpensive, and therefore the Speedster was born.
Yeah.
So, I don't know what insight you have. Again, it was many years before, but did he ever talk about the Speedster and the relationship with Porsche in building that car and what it meant to him?
From the correspondence I still have, he had a very good relationship with Porsche, with the Porsche family, for a long time. It became very successful, and he was definitely involved in the design or
The engineering.
engineering. Yeah.
And
So-
he was really engulfed in the Porsche design.
Yes.
And he went to Porsche and said, we want this car to
Yes.
come to the US, and it turned into the Speedster. And from what I understand, he was actually involved in the design of the Porsche crest, the
Yes.
actual logo.
Yes, that came about at a luncheon, was very Porsche, and he said, okay, you have to bringing these cars into the United States, you have to have an emblem. You cannot be without it. And he took the napkin and he scribbled on the napkin what the Porsche emblem should look like. You take the horse from the city of Stuttgart, and before you know it, the Porsche emblem was born.
Yeah. Incredible. So
Incredible.
It
yeah.
really is. And, I don't think he ever imagined what the Speedster sold for $3,000 back in 1956, 57, 58. And today they're in excess of $500,000
Yeah.
plus.
Yes.
So he obviously gave some good advice to the factory. So it wasn't just the Porsche though. He also had a relationship with Mercedes-Benz. And tell me a little bit about what you know about that, but the 300 SL. I mean, again, a car that is one of the most iconic and sought after collectible cars
Yes.
in the history of the automotive industry. And he was instrumental in speaking to Mercedes to build that car and
To build
import.
this car, yes. Mercedes became aware of his success of the Porsches, and they said, okay, we could get in on this deal. And I think they contacted him.
So he's successful with Porsche. This German car he brings over and he has success. And this other German manufacturer at that time says, hey,
Yeah.
there's a channel to get these cars into the US, so let's get involved and work with Max.
And before you knew it, he set up a contract with them. And getting back to your questions of the showroom, I think before if my memory serves me well, before he really picked up Porsche, he represented already some other car manufacturers. He got involved with
Well, Jaguar was one of them.
Jaguar, yeah. He opened up a showroom on 56th Street and Park Avenue on the corner. He presented his cars there, and people lined up in order to see the exotic cars that he was bringing in.
Yeah. See, it's hard to imagine, when people that are listening to this, with Mercedes dealerships on every corner and being what they are today, that this was a foreign car. This was they called them foreign cars
Yes,
back then. It wasn't like a European
It wasn't,
exotic.
no.
This was a foreign car. So and people didn't really know, so it was an attraction. It was a big deal.
Yes, it
so you
was
go into
really,
Manhattan, you go to this showroom in the
Yeah.
city, Hoffman. What was it
Yeah.
called?
I think at that time he called himself just Hoffman Motor.
So now they go to this Hoffman Motors and they're seeing these Mercedes and these Porsches and these, and it goes on with Alfa Romeo and so forth and so on. So it's quite fascinating, and he's selling these cars, and he really was, from what I understand, he sold 40% of all the Porsches sold in the U.S. for the first 10
You're
years.
correct.
That's incredible.
It's unbelievable, yeah.
But it goes further than that. It goes into a car that today is another legend. So I understand, and maybe you can shed some light on this, that he actually gets involved with BMW.
Yes.
And there's a car called the 2002.
Yes.
That is an iconic sports sedan today that is probably above all others. And he was instrumental in talking to BMW, explaining to them they need to put a 2-liter motor.
Yes.
They need to do this, and this, and the car will sell well in the U.S. And he was instrumental in creating another two. So is there any background to that?
Well, again, also I understand the BMW 1600 became very popular with BMW in Europe, or I would say Germany. And out of the 1600 came the 2002. But again, mechanically, he said, you can't, the car does not have enough power, okay? You got to put a 2-liter engine into this car. I think they were still running around with 1600. And he said, no, you have. And again, they listened to him. And 2002 became very successful here. As a matter of fact, I was the one who he selected in the very beginning to go and answer the telephone and tell people about when we had calls coming in, the price and what it had, and lots of interesting calls from all across the United States. I had to send out the brochures. It was successful,
It was successful, yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I don't know what it is, what the connection is, but all of the cars that he was involved with are my favorite cars, and I'm not alone in that.
Yeah.
There's a tremendous amount of people that love these cars. So he had the showroom in Manhattan, and where else did he have showrooms? Anywhere else in the U.S.? I know the Northeast East Coast was his big.
Actually not anymore. Okay, after he closed the 56 corner showroom on Park Avenue. He moved his offices into the Seacom building, and he opened up in Hackensack a large parts department. But I think that all happened when he really took over BMW. He didn't need a showroom anymore. He had created his dealer network across the United States. Distribution. And at the time I started, he had, when he left, he had more than 150 dealers across the country. And then, of course, he created on the request, or pushing, I would say, they were pushing him, that he should have a headquarter here on the East Coast with a showroom, but not for sales.
One of the things I found interesting also is that Max was also, there was no distribution of service or parts. He had to actually do that as well.
Correct, yes. And here we go into his so-called dealer network, which he created across the United States. He made the contracts. Dealers across the United States became aware what was going on. They contacted him. He made contracts with the dealers to have exclusively the what are you calling, the sales?
The rights.
Yeah, the rights,
yeah.
And now he becomes the sole importer for BMW for the last 10 years, from 65 to 75.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the meantime, he was approached, getting back a little bit, he was approached by Ferry Porsche, I think in 1954, I believe. They wanted to take over themselves. And they parted friendly.
In 64. 64.
Was it 64?
Yeah, when the 9/11 was about to come out, right? Yeah.
I think they parted friendly, but here comes another legend. Okay, there's no problem, but he would like to have $50 for the next 10 years that Porsche sells. He did that with Mercedes, and he did it with BMW.
So as the story goes, is he actually made more money getting out of contracts than he did in the
Than he-
contracts?
yes,
I mean,
yeah.
pretty smart businessman.
He parted also. He parted with Mercedes very, very in a friendly way, because years later, you know, he visited them. They came over here to see him, and I happened to know that. They come to the office and said hello to Max Hoffman, and he vice versa. He met him at the you know, in Europe. So yeah, the only thing is he did not part too well with BMW.
No, is that right?
They were angry.
what
They got
happened?
angry. Well,
Too good of a deal for him, I guess?
too much of a deal in the very end. But it worked out again. They had to pay for the next 10 years also $50, and that is
$50.
the time when the 320i came out, the
Okay.
320 series, and
Yeah.
and he died around that time.